Thank you very much. Let me see if I can just get my screen shared. And right, is that all good?
Yeah.
Okay,
All good, all set.
great. Very good. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be here today. So I have my presentation that I'll go through. I'm very happy to take questions, but if you don't mind, I'll do that at the end because sometimes a question comes up that ends up being answered in a subsequent slide. So yeah, like I said, I'm a volunteer with Volunteer Toronto, and these slides we'll talk about how to use your skills and knowledge that you have to volunteer, understanding your reasons for volunteering, and talking a bit about how to use Volunteer Toronto as a resource. So for those who are unfamiliar, Volunteer Toronto, what we do is we connect volunteers to information about volunteering and opportunities and nonprofits across Toronto. And it seems like some of you are not in Toronto. There's likely very much a similar thing in your community as well. Just to be clear, we're not a matching service, so we give presentations like this, we give resources, we give support, but you do the legwork when it comes to actually finding the opportunities. And Volunteer Toronto also supports the other side of the equation. It supports volunteer coordinators and organizations that are looking to onboard volunteers as well. So the question we always start out with is, what is volunteering? And for some people that might seem like an obvious answer, but for many people it's not necessarily, especially in Canada, a place that welcomes a lot of newcomers. Volunteering is not necessarily a thing in some countries, and sometimes where it is, it's not necessarily viewed in the same way. So here, volunteering is freely giving your time and your service and your knowledge, usually at a nonprofit, and it's literally completely voluntary, as the word says. If you ever have to do something, it's not volunteer. This is clearly because you want to. And some people ask, well, if you're not getting paid, why would I volunteer? And there's so many reasons for that, which we will discuss. So seniors, especially, are a vital force for volunteering. So more seniors volunteer than other age groups. That could be depending on their various backgrounds and life experience, but also because they tend to have more time if they are retired. And then why? For so many reasons, religious reasons, using skills, learning new skills, remaining involved in the community, and supporting causes that are important to them. And seniors contribute to all sectors. People say, well, what is there out there for me? And it's just the sky's the limit, really, in hospitals, religious organizations, sports, arts, and on the ground, either doing events, organizing, or supervisor fundraising, or at a higher level on boards or committees. So really, you're not limited to certain sectors or roles. The variety is out there. So right now we do talk about safety. The pandemic is still a thing, and now with flu and so many other things, safety is definitely something to consider. And the rules change every 5 minutes. It's hard to keep up. What we suggest to people is consider your circumstances. So there's no right or wrong answer. Each person of any age has to consider what is right for them. So depending on your living arrangements, your health, the health of people you live with, and so on, decide what is right for you, what you're comfortable with. Some people aren't comfortable, going to a restaurant right now. So you might not be comfortable going to a large group opportunity. So organizations are doing their best to minimize the infection, but there's only so much they can do. But that's not to say that you can't volunteer if you're not comfortable with going in person. There are virtual roles as well, and we'll talk about a few examples. So just some terms to be familiar with. Nonprofit. So a nonprofit is an organization that does not exist to make money. So you're not going to volunteer in Tim Hortons, right? You're going to volunteer in nonprofits. So they may get money from fundraising and government and other sources, but the point is the money is supposed to go back into the organization to support the mission or the cause. There is a staff, so they do have to pay their staff, and it may be a registered charity. Some people are very interested in knowing how much money an organization puts towards the cause, towards administration, and those sort of things. And you can research companies and Better Business Bureaus to find that information if that's a consideration you want to look into. And we hear the word grassroots a lot, and that's a nonprofit that springs up to fill an urgent community need. Often it highlights a current issue. It's not a registered charity, and it's volunteer run. So there are two types of volunteering: formal volunteering, which happens at a nonprofit. The way you secure a role is very similar to the process of finding a paid role. The steps are very similar. You train for the role as far as what's expected of you and how the organization works. And you get a record of hours and references. So we put that. So sometimes people want a record of hours. Sometimes they need to prove how many hours they have volunteered. But there are a lot of people who volunteer just for the love of volunteering. So you may not have to worry about getting a record of hours. So when I said I volunteered from Volunteer Toronto since 2014, I had to go and look that up to remind myself for this presentation. I haven't had to, I don't on a daily basis have to prove that, but you'll hear if you have grandchildren who are high schoolers, they have to prove the hours in order to graduate. But if you ever need a record of hours, the organization can provide that for you. Informal volunteering, it happens as part of a group or community members. There's no formal application or training, and this allows you to volunteer quickly and easily. So with informal volunteering, often you can start right away. You connect with your community, you find people with similar passions and interests, and networking. I mean, you get to know people. You very rarely find a posting, really a formal sort of posting for informal volunteering. So it's kind of hard to give an example, but informal volunteering would be something like, you know, I don't know, let's say there's a flood or something and people just gather together to help the people who are affected. Something like the influx of Ukrainian refugees who have come, and people just decide, you know what, I'm going to ask my neighbors and friends if they can donate food or clothing or school supplies for the kids. So informal volunteering is very much just looking around and raising your hand, letting people know you're willing to lend a hand. It could be making sure that your neighbors have groceries, or people get their sidewalks shoveled when we get that freezing rain season coming upon us. For formal roles, there are a few more steps. And first, we encourage you to reflect, ask yourself some questions, do some research, and then reach out. So I'm going to break these down a little bit. So ask yourself some questions first. So whether you're new to volunteering or whether you haven't volunteered for a while, or you volunteer a lot, but you're looking for something new, ask yourself questions first. It's kind of a waste of everyone's time if you just start applying here, there, and everywhere. You want to have some focus. So think things like your limits. So not limits in like what you can or cannot do, but your own parameters of what you're comfortable with. So safety concerns, like we said, are you ready to volunteer in person, or do you want to stick to virtual right now? Or maybe you don't want to work with people at all. That's okay too. Maybe you want to volunteer with the environment. Maybe you want to volunteer with animals. Maybe you want to work alone. There are roles for that as well. So just, consider what your comfort level is now, what your interests are. Am I comfortable learning new technology? So if you don't already know technology, but you're willing to learn, there's something there. If you hate working with computers, then that's a consideration as well. And do I have other limits? Sometimes some roles require people to lift heavy items. So if you have health issues that you can't lift things a lot, maybe that's something to keep an eye out. If it's a role that requires driving and you don't even own a car, those are the kind of limits we're talking about, the practical limitations. So give that some thought. Think about what's important to you, and these are personal questions, so it doesn't matter what other people answer for themselves. Ask yourself if there's a cause you're passionate about. And passion is a strong word, so I mean, you don't have to save the world, but find an area that is of interest to you. So if you like sports, look into sports. If you like arts and culture, look into that. You should never drag yourself to a volunteer role. It's not like a job that people hate, but you have to go because you have to pay your rent. Volunteer should be enjoyable. It should be of interest to you. Are there people you want to help, or organizations, or like I said, the environment, animals, something like that? And what do you want to explore? So very often people think volunteer, okay, what is my training in? What is my experience in? That's great, but maybe you want to branch out. Maybe you want to learn something new, and volunteer is a way to do that. And lean into your strengths. So think about your lived experience. And again, think about if you've had training or if you worked in a particular field, that's valuable, but think about your hobbies as well. So maybe you worked as an accountant and you'd be great to help with tax season, but maybe you're also an experienced gardener and you have a green thumb like nobody else, right? So things like that. Can you use your expertise in a new way? And who could benefit? Like what do you have to give that somebody can learn from you? So just to kind of think of that, so you know what you are looking for. Other questions would be the practical. Are you willing to commute? Are you looking for a particular neighborhood? What is your schedule like? Are you free every day, or are you only free on Mondays? So think about that as well. Once you've thought and kind of have some more focus on what you're looking for, and then you do your research. So see what's out there. So of course, I'm going to say you can visit volunteertoronto.ca. You can check our website, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You can also sign up for various newsletters. There's a Volunteer Times, there's a COVID response. If you sign up for these new newsletters, they won't clog up your inbox. They come through maybe once a month or something, and it just updates with any new information, new postings, or some blogs. So that's there as well. But you can also look into other organizations as well. It's just Volunteer Toronto is kind of the one-stop shopping to get started. So you can think of broader roles like joining a board, joining a committee, advisory services, providing your professional services, joining advocacy groups, or things more on the ground and more what's the word? I'm blanking, but volunteer drivers, volunteering in food banks, mental health initiatives. You can be a mentor, peer support, counseling, things like that. Again, the sky's the limit, right? So I'm going to go through these next slides very quickly. What I'll invite you to do is in your own time, you can explore our website and get familiar with it, and then reach out to Volunteer Toronto if you have any questions about it. You don't have to go to Volunteer Toronto, like I said, you can go directly to organizations. So if you want to volunteer in a hospital, you can contact the hospital. You can go to a hospital website, see if they have, right on their website, they might have a volunteer information page, and it might link directly to an application. You can approach the schools in your neighborhood if they need help. You can go to your local library and see what they offer, or go directly to organizations. But if you check out volunteertoronto.ca, you can check out search, and it leads you to this page. Now, our website is great, but we know our search engine leaves a bit to be desired. We know that, but it's what we have for now. So you see all these keywords and stuff, and you can try to navigate that, or you can just skip all that and just hit search. There's no need to get tied up with this page. You can just click on search. So on our website, if you click on a search, you get a list, sometimes long, sometimes short, of positions that are available. So for the sake of this example, we're looking at this first one, Dixon Hall Neighborhood Services, meal delivery volunteers. So you see a posting and then you click on it, and this is what comes up. This is sort of the template of what you will see on any of our postings. So at the top, some bullet points, the name of the organization, the date that it's posted, city, country, and so on. If on our website you see a posting that looks a little bit old, a few weeks old, if it's still up, they're very likely still recruiting. It could be an ongoing position, or they could still be looking. It doesn't hurt to reach out to the organization and say, this is a couple weeks old. I just wonder if you really are still recruiting. Where it says city, Toronto. Okay, but Toronto is a very big city. So I really encourage you to take the next step and to Google the organization and find out geographically where they are. A lot of people don't do this. They spend a lot of time and energy applying for position, only to find out at the last minute that, wow, that's on the other side of the city. That's way too far for me. So do yourself a favor and check it out. Even if it's a virtual role, check out where they are on the chance that it does become in person in the future. So I won't read all the points. This is an example, but it will give a position summary. It will give the qualifications that they're looking for, and sometimes that might be specific, or it could be the soft skills like you're reliable, you're punctual, sensitive to the needs of others, able to physically carry meal bags. So that's what I mentioned before. Good comprehension of English. Often they're looking for other languages as well, and so on. It will list major responsibilities. Sometimes they give a blurb about what the organization is all about. Here on the very top as well, going back to that, Monday, Wednesdays, and or Thursdays. So if you have determined that Saturday is the only day you can volunteer, when you see this, you know that that's not the role for you with this organization. So that's part of the assessing beforehand what you're willing to do. The recruitment process, it lists out, tells you the dress code, and then it gives you benefits. Volunteering is very much a two-way relationship now. They recognize, good organizations recognize that you are giving your time and your expertise and your skills, but that you do want something in return. So here, what you get is your work interacting with seniors, and so you're helping out this community. There's the opportunity to meet new people. They provide TTC tokens, so they will help you with your transportation. And if you want a reference letter, they'll provide that as well. COVID-19 response, some templates, some postings really specify this. Most postings now will say they require people to be vaccinated. So if you are not vaccinated, virtual would be the way to go for now. If you're not vaccinated, it's going to be really tough right now, to be honest, to find a volunteer role. So, and organizations will list their COVID-19 response. If you don't see it in the posting, you can ask the organization. They should be able to answer your questions. So if you find a posting and you read through it and you think you might be interested and the timing works for you, at the bottom, it will tell you how to apply. And this is key. Sometimes it will bring you a link to an application. Sometimes it will ask for a resume. Sometimes it will say, send us an email. There are a variety of things that you might be asked to do. With Volunteer Toronto, it's not Volunteer Toronto giving you the instructions, it's the organization. So if it's interesting for you, read this part and follow their instructions. If you don't, it looks like you didn't read the posting and then you can't follow instructions. So definitely do what they ask. And it often says for more information, you can give a call. So with job postings where it says no phone calls, it really means no phone calls. But with volunteering, yeah, they provide a number. You can definitely call for more information if you have questions. So when you have some places, you know, you want to reach out, you want to explore, then you reach out. So you might be asked for an application. So I'll go through, yeah. So an application, it might take you to a link. If you don't have a resume, you might want to have something or brush up a resume from previously. They will conduct interviews very often online right now, and that's also an opportunity for you to ask questions of your own and be expected to provide references. So they could be professional references or references from other volunteer roles. If you're involved with community organizations, if you're taking any sort of class, your teacher can be a reference. Family members and friends aren't, they don't qualify as references. Okay, so a lot of people try to use that, but you know, of course your mom's going to say good things about you. So family and friends don't count as references, sorry to say. Criminal reference checks, police checks, some roles don't require that at all. Sometimes they do. So a vulnerable screening sector is mandatory for anyone working with children, seniors, or people with disabilities. And what would happen if you need this is once the organization decides to take you on, they will provide you the instructions and the paperwork to go about doing this. It says here the fee is $20, but that could vary. The fee in Toronto might be different than the fee in Windsor, might be different than the fee in Mississauga. Sometimes the organization pays for it, but they don't have to. Sometimes that is a cost the volunteer needs to take on. A criminal record check is not as in-depth, but required if you are going to be driving or have access to personal information. Now, they'll make sure that you're a safe person. This one is not necessarily a deal breaker. So, for example, if you want to be a Meals on Wheels driver and they find out you have a lot of traffic infractions, yeah, then that would be a deal breaker. But if you have a terrible driving record, but you're not going to be anywhere near a car in your role, then that's not necessarily a deal breaker. These are now free in Ontario. That's a recent change. And it says here you can go online to get it, but you know what, for either of these, wait till you need it, because sometimes organizations want it recent within a certain, the last 6 months or the last 3 months or something. So wait till you need it. There's no point in trying to get it in advance because you might not find a role for 7 months and then you have to go through it all again. They come through fairly quickly. So, you know, don't worry too much about that. The vulnerable sector, these are for long-term roles as well. If you're working with children or seniors or people with disabilities, they're going to expect you to stick around. This is not like a weekend deal because you are creating relationships with people. So they can't afford to have people just, you know, come and go. So here's some examples here. And I took these from the Volunteer Toronto website. So you can go there and get more information or to the website. So again, just some examples. So for example, St. John the Compassionate Mission has drop-in breakfast programs, as do a lot of other organizations. So often these are volunteer runs, soup kitchens, things like that. So in this case, as a breakfast host, you'll be serving meals, you'll be assisting with the food prep, chatting with guests. They're looking for people who have a sense of hospitality, have good teamwork, and it's 1 shift per week. And note for this one, it starts at 5 a.m. So if you're an early bird, this might be for you. you're an early bird, but you live across the city, like I said, that's why you have to consider things like that. So to apply, this organization asks you to contact Sean at info@stjohnsmission.org to express your interest. So when it comes to like applying for a role, sometimes they're really in depth, like a board, they might want your whole resume and past work experience. Sometimes it's simple as this, you know, it's not necessarily always an onerous procedure, but it still counts as formal, right? If you need to do something like this. Another example, so currently during the holiday seasons, sometimes roles pop up. So for example, the Salvation Army is looking for people to volunteer with their Christmas kettles. So you're greeting shoppers, handing out candy canes, you can sing carols, or you don't have to sing, but it says other creative festive ideas. That's a quote from their posting. So whatever that means for you, they want people who are friendly, trustworthy, and reliable, right? You're overseeing the money that people are putting in the kettles. And here it says a minimum of 1 shift, right? And it's downtown Toronto. So minimum 1 shift, but of course, if you say I'm happy to do more than one, they'd be more than happy to talk to you. So you do 1 shift and see if you like it. These particular ones are downtown Toronto. It's from Volunteer Toronto, but there might be other opportunities across other parts of Ontario as well. So here you send an email or call Jeremy and you reference Kettle Volunteers. I will point out as well that often at this time of year, a lot of people, they see food drives and Christmas kettles and things like that, and they want to, give. There's that holiday spirit. Often organizations, they get filled up pretty quickly with volunteers. So a lot of time they get more volunteer offers than they actually need. Don't forget about these organizations afterwards. So often in January, these organizations are like, we still need help. Where are the holiday, the holiday goodwill seems to disappear. So don't forget about these organizations, even outside of the big event seasons. And here's a virtual example.
So sorry to interrupt you. I just want to let you know that you just have 1 minute left. We just have to wrap up soon, but thank you so much for this amazing information. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, I'll try. Okay, so you can apply to be a mentor. And this is Wood Green Community Services, and there are other organizations that have similar things. So you are mentoring a newcomer in their field. So this would be, if you are a teacher, you would be helping out an internationally trained teacher, not with language, but with help with navigating their professional route to find work. So easier said than done. Don't be discouraged. Sometimes it takes a while to find a match and something that you really like. So keep trying. Absolutely apply for more than 1 position at once. Don't send 1 application and sit back and wait. And you can volunteer for as many different organizations as you want. It's as long as it fits your time. Practice self-care. Some roles take a lot out of you, so make sure you take care of yourself, otherwise you just get burnt out. Share your feelings. So that's not divulging anything that's confidential, but that is communicating with the volunteer coordinator what's not working and what is working. And change is okay. So if you decide you want to change roles or something, then that's fine too, as long as you let the organization know if you're going to discontinue your volunteering. Don't just disappear. A lot of people do that. That's not fair. Give them the courtesy of letting them know. And like I said, stay in touch. There are newsletters, and you can contact Volunteer Toronto and book an appointment with a volunteer advisor, and they will sit with you one-on-one and answer questions and help you overcome any roadblocks that you're experiencing. So it's not a matching service. They're not going to match you up, but they can definitely sit with you one-on-one and give you some guidance. Are there any questions? How's that for timing?
Thank you so much, Karen. I think we've got time for a couple of minutes of questions if people have got them, and then we'll move into evaluation, raffle, and breakout rooms. So please do drop your questions in the chat or ask them directly of Karen. A lot of helpful information there.
There's one that came directly to me. I volunteered since childhood. It was an expectation. Now things have changed. Somehow resentful seeing others who have never volunteered but have affluent lives there are people who grew up surrounded by volunteering, or they might have had parents who volunteered or grandparents, but there are a lot of people who have not had that. There are a lot of people who did not grow up seeing people around them volunteer, and some people from other countries, volunteering is not a thing, so they come and they wonder what the big deal is. So sometimes it is hard to understand. Well, I've always I volunteered, my parents volunteered, but a lot of people just do not have those examples. Somehow condescending. I don't know, that's don't take that personally. I guess. And there are a lot of people who volunteer that don't advertise it, right? Sometimes people volunteer and it's like, look at me, but there are a lot of people, sometimes I meet someone and I don't know they volunteered until it just happens to come out. They're so modest about it. And they're giving a lot without tooting their own horn. So sometimes people volunteer that you more might realize. If it's condescending, it's not towards you. I would just say focus on where you can give, and then just look at that impact. And people who don't have just be a role model, I guess, is what I can say.
What is the number in Toronto? What's the number to call in Toronto for volunteer?
Let's see. My slide's not letting me go back. I think this will be shared with you after. I don't have the number memorized.
I have 416-961, but I wasn't able to take the rest because it went.
Yeah.
We will see if we can find it and drop it into the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my screen's not letting me. Oh, there you go.
Here we go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
so that's it. But don't call it a volunteer advisor right away. Do some legwork first, do some research, send out, and then come with questions. So don't go right away and say, I saw this presentation. Come with questions, do some legwork, because they're not going to match you. They're there to support you, but do some legwork first, reach out and come back with specific questions and what's going well and where you need some assistance.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Yes, my name is Melker, and I volunteer for 15 years at Sunnybrook. But after I retire, I say I would have continued, but I come now and I had a back surgery and I'm using a walker. Is it possible for me still to volunteer anywhere else? Because I'm using a walker.
You might consider virtual roles. There's that. So from the comfort of your own home, if you want to get out in the community, perhaps there are volunteer roles where you might be in an office or something where you might be, be able to sit, things like that, or committees, or or things like that, or sometimes even like something like the Christmas kettle. If you can get there, you are sitting. So yeah, there are plenty of roles that don't require walking or moving around. There could be at the computer or sitting, or you're in a location. So definitely there's lots of stuff for you. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And if you volunteered for 15 years, they know you, so it wouldn't hurt reaching out. If you're interested in going back there and saying, I volunteered for you 15 years, happy to do so again, but I'm in a walker now. Is there anything you need assistance with?
I used to volunteer on the veteran wing because I used to work there. And then the last volunteer I was doing was sitting down. But now with the COVID, they kind of limited people to come in. People don't really go in as much.
Yeah, and that's the thing with some places so volunteer, there are a lot of in-person volunteers that have come back, but it's not like it was before the pandemic, and some places will still limit. So there are cases like that where they do need volunteers. They can't take as many right now. So it might just be a question of waiting. So things are coming back in person, but it's not quite what it was pre-pandemic.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll give the last question or word to Bill, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Zor. And thank you for the presentation, Karen.
Pleasure.
It's very important. And I, in my community, experienced the the problem that you were mentioning earlier, that some people, particularly folks who didn't grow up in this area, that volunteering is not something they understand or something they have any interest in. So are you aware of any volunteer organizations that are focused specifically on helping to bring volunteer services into these senior communities that are full of people who don't believe in volunteering? Because volunteers need to be here, and there's an expectation that seniors volunteer in their communities. And if you're in a community with a bunch of people who don't volunteer and don't believe in it, is there, are there organizations out there that to try to fulfill and support some of those feeble efforts in these buildings?
Not offhand. You could reach out to Volunteer Toronto, and some of the staff might have that, but not as far as I know. And I would say, because it's sometimes it's people from different countries that see volunteer differently, but there's a lot of Canadians who grew up in Canada that didn't see, and then even with like high school, there's an effort, students are supposed to put in that 40 hours. And the idea do you like put in your 40 hours, and hopefully the youth will love it and continue. And that does happen sometimes, but they're finding a lot of the youth that go above and beyond are youth that probably would have done that anyways, and some get their 40 hours and I'm done. I don't think it's necessary to if people don't want to volunteer or they don't see the value, I don't think it's necessary to really change their mind. And that, because if you kind of force them to do and they don't want to be there, then that defeats the entire purpose. I would say, it's a personal decision, and if people volunteer, and if other people see that you enjoy it, like, wow, you volunteer and look, you're just absolutely glowing, and you're giving back. So I don't know if it's, I don't think there's a need to convince people who really don't want to or don't see the value of it.
It's not about convincing people who don't want to volunteer.
Mhm.
It's about finding finding volunteers to come in to be support in these communities that won't volunteer themselves. Basically, I'm in a low income community of about 200 tenants. And there's an expectation that, and there are other buildings where there's an expectation that these senior tenant leaders, that they be the volunteers and that they draw volunteers of the community to make the community develop. And so there's a conundrum there, because there's this expectation that it's these communities who are supposed to lift themselves, and they are full of people who have no interest in doing that. So, so I'm wondering about how do we supplant that? With volunteers who.
Yeah. Once you say there's an expectation, then it's no longer volunteering.
Well, yeah,
right. It's kind of like you take a course.
That's been my point. That's been my point for a few years here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you say expectation, then it's no longer volunteering, which is
yes,
then you're kind of going in a circle.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bill. Really important points, and thank you.
You can start volunteering, Bill.